Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Brendan Kelleher. The DC Extended Universe, or DCEU for short, has had quite a rollercoaster ride since it debuted in 2013 with the Zack Snyder directed Man of Steel. With the Marvel Cinematic Universe series of films consistently making billions of dollars since that franchise began in 2008, the film studio Warner Bros., which owned the film rights to the DC Comics characters, soon made plans for their own shared cinematic universe. Multiple films starring classic comic book characters like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and many more were planned, as well as a massive team-up event movie named Justice League to rival Marvel's Avengers franchise. Not everything went to plan, with several films such as Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and Suicide Squad making good box office numbers, but being met with divisive audience and critical response. As these movies came out, Warner Bros. Changed direction from film to film, with the relatively gritty and realistic tone of the likes of Man of Steel to the campy and childish tone of Joss Whedon's cut of Justice League. There have been several triumphs in this universe of films, however, such as Patty Jenkins' first Wonder Woman movie starring Gal Gadot, and James Wan's Aquaman, which was an unexpected runaway hit, making over $1 billion worldwide. Surprising given the character's previous reputation as being possibly one of the silliest in DC Comics history. With Black Adam starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson set off a whole new era for the DC Extended Universe, I thought now was a good time to rank the movies from worst to best. This list will not include the films Joker or The Batman. Both excellent films, but are set in their own standalone universe, away from the larger, more connected universe of the DCEU. These are just my opinions only, and feel free to comment down below and rank your own list. So starting right at the bottom with Justice League. This is the movie that should have been the crown jewel of the DC Extended Universe. All the movies that had been released previously, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad, and Wonder Woman, set the stage for what was supposed to be the biggest superhero team-up movie ever made, starring Batman, Superman, The Flash, Aquaman, and Cyborg. What could possibly go wrong? Well, basically a movie studio losing their nerve after director Zack Snyder's Man of Steel and Batman v Superman underperformed critically and commercially. Rather than staying the course and sticking to Snyder's vision and overall master plan with the DCEU, the studio panicked and made drastic changes to David Ayer's Suicide Squad movie, turning it into a 2-hour music video. As for Justice League, not only was Zack Snyder fought at every turn during filming and encouraged to include more family-friendly humour, the final cut of the film was a result of massive reshoots by director Joss Whedon, who turned the film into a discount Avengers movie. The story was drastically changed. Terrible CGI effects replaced Henry Cavill's mustache, which he was not allowed to shave off for the reshoots. No, I'm not making this up. Ray Fisher's cyborg character was almost entirely removed from the film. Basically, the finished film was nothing less than an act of sheer vandalism by the studio and director Joss Whedon, and the film was a disaster. While there are some good elements of the film in here, mostly the Snyder shot footage, the studio cut of Justice League is an embarrassment and one of the worst superhero films ever made. The release of the later Zack Snyder cut provided a good end to the story, but highlights just how bad this film was, and the worst possible case of the movie being mangled by the studio that financed it. Number 11. Suicide Squad. Speaking of studio meddling, David Ayer's Suicide Squad was another DC movie that was reshaped and mutilated in editing to be a more family-friendly affair, rather than the dark, gritty action film that was originally intended. Ayer was an experienced director of tough action dramas like End of Watch and Fury. Suicide Squad was the story of some of the worst villains of the DC universe being formed into a team to take on high-risk missions, featuring fan-favourite characters like the Joker and Harley Quinn amongst others. Not to mention a special cameo from Batman. The movie featured one of the biggest stars on the planet, a pre-Chris Rock slapping Will Smith. I have to admit, there is a certain entertainment value in Suicide Squad. It's refreshing to see a supervillain-focused comic book movie for a change, and the actors are well cast in their roles. Margot Robbie and Viola Davis in particular literally look like they stepped out of the comics as their respective characters Harley Quinn and Amanda Waller. The movie's soundtrack, featuring some classic songs, is one of the highlights of the film, but strangely also one of its weakest. Like I said earlier, these songs are played for no other reason but to make the film sound cool, and an attempt by the studio to make the movie feel like Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. Jared Leto's Joker has very little screen time, despite being featured heavily in the trailers, and his interpretation as the clown prince of crime proved to be very divisive, coming across like some crazy meth-addicted pop star. Overall, Suicide Squad is a film that is hurt by a severe toning down of its rating. A movie like this really needed a hard R rating to stay true to the violent source material, and the movie comes across more like a 2-hour music video than anything else. Director David Ayer's definitive director's cut is still said to exist, and at the time of recording this video, there is a similar fan campaign to get it released, like Zack Snyder's Justice League. This cut is said to be much darker and more character driven, so let's hope it's released someday. Number 10. Birds of Prey. With Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn proving to be one of the most popular characters from the release of the critically roasted but financially successful Suicide Squad, Robbie was given a solo movie of sorts, teaming her with other female characters from the DC universe. In the movie, Harley breaks up with the Joker, off-screen, and goes her own way. After getting in trouble with the local crime lord Roman Sionis, aka Black Mask, what follows is a rather silly caper involving Harley teaming up with the likes of the Huntress, Black Canary, and Renee Montoya. Birds of Prey is a movie very much inspired by the huge success of Deadpool, right down to Harley breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience, as well as the R-rated violence. I have to admit that I originally skipped this one and only watched it recently for this review video. This movie is basically a Looney Tunes cartoon stretched to 2 hours. While Margot Robbie is fun in the title role, Mary Elizabeth Winstead is the real standout as the Huntress. While the movie is fun, it's so lightweight that it's pretty forgettable and comes across like an expensive TV pilot rather than anything else. Number 9. Wonder Woman 1984. Patty Jenkins' original Wonder Woman movie from 2017 was the first true success story of the DCEU. Not only a critical and commercial hit, but was well received by DC fans. Wonder Woman 1984 was greenlit soon after, and the sequel arrived right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic in December 2020. Set several decades after the original, the film has Wonder Woman going up against a misguided businessman, Maxwell Lord, who uses a magical artifact to control people by granting their wishes. Diana also faces a former friend who becomes the villain Cheetah. While the original Wonder Woman was set during the First World War and had a gritty feel, the sequel, being set in the middle of the 80s, has a very camp tone. Diana doesn't use a sword and shield anymore, and there is a distinct lack of action in the first half. The most controversial aspect of the film is the character of Steve Trevor, who returns from the dead in a very nonsensical manner, and the plot point of Steve inhabiting the body of another man, credited as Handsome Man, was criticised for putting his body into dangerous situations and being used without his consent, including a sex scene between Diana and Steve. The whole storyline regarding a magic stone that grants wishes is just plain silly, and the climax involving Diana fighting, well, wind, and convincing the entire population of the Earth to give up their most desired wishes. Yeah, right. Despite these criticisms, Wonder Woman 1984 does have its highlights. The action that it does have is very well staged. Gal Gadot gives an even better performance than she does in the original, especially during the more emotional scenes of the film, and Hans Zimmer's score is one of his best ever. Number 8. Shazam. Shazam was the first outright comedy of the DCEU. The film tells the story of a teenage boy, Billy Batson, who is gifted with a magical ability to become the adult superhero Shazam whenever he says the magic word. The movie is relatively small scale compared to the likes of Man of Steel and Aquaman, but it is a rather fun, light-hearted adventure. The movie is very much inspired by the classic 1980s Tom Hanks comedy Big, and has at least one visual reference to that film in one sequence. For a very child-focused film, the movie is surprisingly dark and scary in several scenes, so the tone is a bit all over the place. It's sometimes hard to believe this takes place in the DCEU. You can see Batman and Superman toys on display in a store at one point, and it's not quite as funny as it thinks it is. Some scenes just exist to produce cheap laughs and don't drive the plot forward at all, and the film is at least 20 minutes too long. While Zachary Levi is very appealing as the character Shazam, it's hard to believe that he's the grown-up version of Billy Batson, as he acts completely unlike the teenage version of the character played by Asher Angel. Overall, Shazam is a fun but forgettable superhero adventure. Number 7. The Suicide Squad. Despite the original Suicide Squad movie being a box office hit and even an Oscar winner, it took home the Oscar for Best Makeup. It was roasted by critics and fan reaction wasn't much better. While a sequel was on the cards for some time, it wasn't until Guardians of the Galaxy director James Gunn was fired from Disney after several controversial jokes he made on the social media platform Twitter came to light. Warner Brothers quickly swooped in and offered Gunn the chance to direct the Suicide Squad sequel. The Suicide Squad is a soft reboot of sorts. While it doesn't contradict the original film and brings back several actors reprising their roles, including Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn and Joel Kinnaman as Rick Flag, Will Smith did not return as Deadshot. Idris Elba replaces him as a mercenary blood sport, which in fairness may as well have been Deadshot, as he shares the exact same skills and backstory as the Will Smith character. The Suicide Squad is a huge improvement on the original film. Unlike David Ayer, James Gunn was given complete creative control and shot the film with an adult R rating in mind. As a result, the film is packed with extreme violence and swearing, which suits the material. This is a story about bad guys after all. While the overall cast is great, the real standout is John Cena as Peacemaker, a kind of psychotic Captain America who believes in peace at any cost. But as he says himself,
I cherish peace with all my heart. I don't care how many men, women, and children I need to kill to get it.
Special mention must also go to King Shark, a man-eating shark-human hybrid voiced by Sylvester Stallone. Gunn makes this character appealing in the same way he did for Groot in the Guardians of the Galaxy films. While overall the Suicide Squad is great fun, like Shazam, it's a little too long, and the middle section of the film really sags. The last half hour where the team fights a giant jellyfish is insane, however, and just has to be seen to be believed. Number 6. Wonder Woman. Patty Jenkins' original Wonder Woman from 2017 is often regarded as the movie that saved the faltering DCEU, becoming the first true success story of the franchise, raking in over $800 million at the worldwide box office, and a hit with fans and critics. Gal Gadot proved that her scene-stealing appearance in BVS was no fluke, and proved that a female-driven superhero movie could be successful. The story takes place mostly in flashback during World War I, as we see the origin story of Diana Prince as she leaves the magical island of Themyscira to help pilot Steve Trevor stop the war which Diana believes was started by Ares, an old enemy of the Amazons. Wonder Woman is a movie which is very much inspired by the likes of the original Superman movie from 1978, in that it has a very old-fashioned feel in terms of its tone and pacing, and even has several visual references to it, such as the alleyway fight scene. While the film is rather slow-paced, it gives you time to get to know and care about the characters, and when the action does come, such as the now iconic No Man's Land scene, where Wonder Woman goes into action wearing her classic outfit for the first time, it's highly effective, and very much inspired by the style of director Zack Snyder, who helped out with the design of the film's fight scenes. Gal Gadot and Chris Pine are great together, and it's no wonder they brought the character of Steve Trevor back in the sequel, as they have terrific chemistry. It may not have been the smartest thing to do, considering how the quality of that film turned out, but there you go. Number 5. Black Adam. The newest entry on this list, Black Adam stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as Teth Adam, an anti-hero from the ancient city of Kahndaq, and shares backstory with the superhero Shazam, where both characters get their powers from the ancient wizard of the same name. Johnson was attached to play Black Adam for over a decade, and was originally supposed to play him as the villain in Shazam's first solo movie. Eventually, it was decided that Black Adam would get his own movie first. Black Adam takes place mostly in the present day, where he is awakened after centuries of sleep by an archaeologist and a villainous group known as the Intergang. When Adam starts destroying everything in sight, the super team Justice Society of America are sent to stop him. Black Adam has been described by many as a new beginning for the DCEU, but still takes place in the same universe as the other films in the franchise. Viola Davis returns as Amanda Waller from the Suicide Squad movies, and there are several references to other superheroes like Batman, Wonder Woman and Aquaman, who are noticeably absent despite the worldwide threat Black Adam represents. While Adam is very much a villain in the comics, here he's played very much as an anti-hero. While he causes a lot of damage and has no problem killing, he's not the villain of the movie, and actually teams up with the Justice Society, to take down an ancient enemy known as Sabbac. While Johnson is the star of the show, My favourite characters are Dr. Fate, played by Pierce Brosnan, and Hawkman, played by Aldous Hodge, who have a great friendship, and their story is really the heart of the movie. Black Adam is one of the most enjoyable films of the DCEU. It's fast-paced, action-packed, has just the right amount of humour, and marks a great new chapter in the DC universe, particularly with the last-minute appearance of the greatest superhero of them all. Number 4. Aquaman. Aquaman is by far both the biggest and most surprising success story of the DCU. The first solo movie featuring the character played by Jason Momoa in BVS and Justice League, Aquaman has long been seen as one of the silliest characters in DC Comics history, a man who was born to Atlantean and human parents. Arthur Curry is a man who is able to breathe underwater, has super strength, and the ability to communicate with sea life. Set not long after the events of Justice League, the plot involves Aquaman teaming up with Princess Mera to prevent King Orm from taking control of Atlantis and waging war on the surface world. Aquaman is one of the most visually stunning and ambitious movies of the DCU. The movie takes place on or under the sea, and the visual effects used to convey the city of Atlantis, the powers of Aquaman, and all the other action in the film are some of the best since Avatar in 2009. Jason Momoa's interpretation of Aquaman is a lot different from the way the character is conveyed in the comics, but this was necessary as a direct adaptation of the comic character just wouldn't work on screen. Aquaman used to be one of the silliest characters in DC Comics, but not anymore thanks to Jason Momoa's tough-as-nails performance. The film is helped by a great supporting cast, including Patrick Wilson as King Orm, Willem Dafoe as Arthur's mentor Vulko, and especially Nicole Kidman as Arthur's mother Atlanna. Oh, and Amber Heard is in it too. Well, at least she looks good. Number 3. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Zack Snyder's second DCEU film was one of the most anticipated comic book films in recent memory. A sort of sequel to Man of Steel, which pitted Superman against the Dark Knight himself, Batman, played by Ben Affleck. Intended as the real launching point for the DCU after introducing Henry Cavill's Superman in Man of Steel, the movie famously had a release date clash with Marvel's Captain America: Civil War, until BVS ultimately blinked first and chose an earlier release date. Ben Affleck made his debut as Batman in this film, and despite some initial negative reaction from the internet regarding his casting, he soon became a fan favourite. The movie follows the events of Man of Steel as the world reacts to the aftermath of the Kryptonian invasion. Lex Luthor manipulates the growing rivalry and distrust between Batman and Superman, culminating in an epic battle between the two heroes. Infamously released in a cut-down version of director Zack Snyder's original 3-hour version, certain important story elements were left on the cutting room floor, resulting in a rather disjointed narrative. There's a lot going on in BVS, acting not only as a sequel to Man of Steel, but a setup for the later superhero team-up film Justice League, as well as several spin-offs for Wonder Woman, Aquaman, The Flash, and Cyborg. Like Zack Snyder's later director's cut of Justice League, the ultimate edition of BVS that was released on home media is the definitive version of the film, and the only version that should be watched. BVS does have its problems, being a bit too overplotted and having a rather grim tone, but time has been kind to it, standing head and shoulders above a lot of recent fare by Marvel, and the action scenes are some of the best of any comic book movie you've ever seen. Especially the now famous warehouse fight, which to this day is still the best live action depiction of Batman in combat, which was obviously very much inspired by the terrific Arkham series of video games. Number 2. Man of Steel. The movie where the DCU really began. Henry Cavill's first solo outing as Superman turned out to be one of the most controversial DC movies ever made. The first real reboot of the Superman movie franchise since the Christopher Reeve era is a relatively grounded and gritty take on the character. Zack Snyder's mission statement was to act as if there had been no Superman movies before this one. But despite criticisms to the contrary, the film is very respectful to the spirit and dignity of the character. While the movie's plot plays like a combination of the first two movies of the Reeve era, the execution couldn't be more different. The story is very much one of first contact with an alien race, and deals with the questions of how the world would react if an alien with near godlike powers was revealed. Henry Cavill's interpretation of Superman is that of one trying to find his place in the world, and coming to terms with the powers that he's been given and the huge responsibility it puts on his shoulders. While some have criticised this portrayal as being too dark, Cavill's Superman always tries to do the right thing and help people no matter what. Michael Shannon's General Zod is one of the best villains to appear in a comic book based movie. What makes him scary is not just his willingness to commit extreme acts of violence, but his belief that he is in fact doing the right thing. A monster doesn't see a monster in the mirror. The second half of the movie is a near hour-long battle, where Superman defends his new home from an invasion by his own people. These sequences are some of the best superhero action you'll see in any movie. Director Zack Snyder actually pulls back on the slow motion that he was known for in these kind of sequences, which was possibly inspired by director Christopher Nolan's approach to his Batman movies. The most controversial aspect of the film is Superman actually killing the villain, which is still heavily debated by comic book purists to this day. While the film proved divisive at the time of release, its reputation has grown over the years, particularly after the release of Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League, which leads us to the movie that makes the top of this list. Number 1. Zack Snyder's Justice League. Whereas Joss Whedon's studio-mandated cut of Justice League was a mutilation of Zack Snyder's work on the ultimate DC superhero team-up movie, the Snyder Cut, as it came to be called, was everything the fans wanted to see and more. Willed into existence by a fan base who refused to give up, Zack Snyder's Justice League was a result of 4 years of hashtags, fan protests outside Warner Brothers studios, billboards, and online campaigns in support of Snyder's vision. While many online commentators and the studio itself insisted that the Snyder Cut would never happen, the arrival of the HBO Max streaming service and the need for new content, as well as the tireless campaigning by fans and Snyder himself, meant his director's cut was given a $70 million budget to complete his vision, and the film was released in 2021 to wide critical acclaim. Zack Snyder's Justice League is everything fans could have hoped for and more. Almost doubling the running time of the theatrical cut, the film dispenses with the reshot footage by Joss Whedon and is all the better for it. The excessive childish humour and terrible CGI is gone, not to mention the awful CGI removal of Henry Cavill's mustache. The action is edited much better. Steppenwolf as a villain is much more scary, thanks to the much improved CGI in his appearance, and actually has more of a backstory, thanks to the reveal that he is actually a henchman to the film's real master villain, Darkseid. Darkseid was only briefly mentioned in the theatrical cut, but makes his first appearance here in the Snyder Cut. Even though his screen time is rather brief, he makes Thanos from the Marvel Cinematic Universe look weak in comparison. Overall, the extended running time means the story has time to breathe, and the large cast of characters get extended backstories, which gives us time to get to know them. The characters of Aquaman, and especially Cyborg, benefit the most from this. The Snyder Cut serves really as much as an origin story for Ray Fisher's Cyborg. His is the character that was done the most injustice, no pun intended, from the Whedon cut, and his character is really the soul of the movie. It would be a shame if we never get to see this character in the DCEU again. Overall, Zack Snyder's Justice League is an absolute masterpiece, and a true story of redemption, as it went from being one of the worst comic book movies ever made to one of the best. It's unlikely that we will see the end result of Zack Snyder's planned vision for Justice League Part 2 and 3, but they said we'd never see the Snyder Cut as well, so stranger things have happened. And that is it for my ranking of the movies of the DCEU. Do you agree? Disagree? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, then please give it a like, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and click the bell for notifications. Most importantly, I hope you all look after yourselves, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye for now.